poems of Voltaire and his contribution to literature, his contribution to French literature, and his contribution to French Revolution. So there are certain interesting things that he talks about, and some things are very cryptic as well as kind of confusing, you could say, and also not very clear. You can give any number of interpretations to what he is trying to tell us. All right, so here we have the interesting picture of Voltaire. So he is one of the greatest of the philosophers who emerged out of the French soil, and his enlightenment vision was that of progress. He wanted everyone to progress. So that was his idea. One second. Why is this not coming? Right. So today we'll limit ourselves to Voltaire. Tell me when the screen is visible. All right. So he was this very bestseller. People were longing and waiting to read whatever he wrote. Most of them were scandalous, outright controversial, with a lot of, you could say, he would criticize the society, he would make fun of them, his attacks would be really scathing and vitriolic. That is acerbic kind of attack on the people, the way they would lead their sinful lives. He would make fun of all that, and his works reflected this that zest for life, and at the same time making, tongue in cheek, making fun of all that was happening in society. So his father wanted him to study law, but he ended up in literature. And when he went there, he made the best use of his college education, where he also was trained in the theater. So he was into all kinds of theatrical productions and acting and things like that. And when he was a student itself, he had become quite infamous because he was imprisoned for a couple of months, 11 months, because he lampooned somebody. Lampoon is to making fun of someone. So he lampooned the regent, the nobility. So what happened? He was sent to jail. He was sent to jail. And later he used a lot of satire against the noble people, that finally what happened, these rulers, the ruling class, they had enough of him, so they sent him on exile. So he was exiled from France. So even as a youngster itself, he had to be on the run. He had to kind of go away from France, because if he had been around, he would have been maybe imprisoned or executed. That was his life, all the time on the go, on the run. So he was exiled to, he was sent out of France. So where did he go? He went to England. So he stayed in England for around 3 years or so. So being in England, he made use of that opportunity. He learned the English language. He was a Frenchman. He learned the English language, and he observed keenly what was happening in Great Britain. So he was really impressed with the English system of government, as in the way monarchy was functioning there. If you remember, the Glorious Revolution had happened at that time, 1684. It was a bloodless kind of a revolution, and how everything was happening in a very harmonious fashion. So he really loved understanding the functioning of the monarchy, that is House of Commons, the upper house of the nobles, and the way the justice system was functioning. So he was very appreciative of the British style of governance. He also saw how the English was managing their religious affairs. We know that Britain had to go through quite a lot, the rough patches were there. But then during the time of Glorious Revolution, that was the peak of glory, wherein both religion as well as politics was in balance. Nothing was in excess. So he found how these different religious sects in England, that is the Protestants and the Catholics, even among the Protestants, they were the Calvinists, right? These different groups were there. So they were all living in harmony. without killing each other. So he saw all this and he appreciated all this, and then he compares and contrasts what was happening in Great Britain with what was happening in French. So according to him, the French were not matured and they were not grown enough to become like that of the British. So all this can be seen there, and he was very angry also at the blatant abuse of power by the French. So the very fact that he was exiled out of France shows how power was actually abused by the powerful people. So this can be seen in all his writings. So he was known for his skepticism. Skepticism is someone is that philosophy wherein you doubt and question everything. So he was a skeptic. He would not accept things just like that for the sake of it. He would always have some doubt about it. So he was known for his skepticism. He was very humorous. He was very witty, and his satire was really biting. And it is a satire that always landed him in trouble. And like he was imprisoned for 11 months during his student days, and later he had to be exiled, right? He was exiled for 3 years, all because of his biting satire and satirical kind of writings. And his criticism was really stinging, biting. That is, if you read it and you are the target of that criticism, you would not be able to forgive him. He was that kind of a writer. Again, he was really rebellious, and his writings were heretical as in against the religion. He actually uh, he would actually critique and criticize religion. He did not believe in the rigor of religion that was practiced by the French people. That is talking about baptism and all these different rituals that were seen as very natural and God given by the Catholic Church. He did not agree with all that. So he admired England. He admired the English, and he actually criticized the right. So that I think in between I had lost my network. Okay, so we're going to look at some of his major works, and the works tell us what his belief system is, what his philosophy is. So there's this work called Philosophical Letters on the English. So this was written when he had gone to stay in England when he was exiled from France. So this work, Philosophical Letters on the English, it shows his admiration for the English system, and it indirectly attacks the French system, which he calls very crude and immature. He ridicules the church and the rites like baptism and confession and things like that. He ridicules all that, and his writing was so scandalous that it was considered libelous, and people had either both the religious heads as well as the noble people, they ordered him to be arrested. He admired the English House of the Commons and the Upper House, the peaceful coexistence of different religious sects in England. There is this very famous line by him wherein he says, an Englishman, like a free man, he goes to heaven by whatever route he chooses. So it's funny, but at the same time, he's being critical of the church in France. You can understand that, right? So he's saying, English people, if you want to go to heaven, you can go by any route. That is, any route, as in you can be a Protestant. Even among Protestants, you can be any of the different sects, or you can be a Catholic, and then you can go to heaven. But then this was not possible in France, which was, you could say, a very, very strict Catholic country. So he critiqued religion and politics of France, and then he contrasts it to the British system, which he considers to be more democratic. And though it was a monarchy, it was an example of mature monarchy, unlike that in France. Uh, so that was one, that philosophical letters. The other is a play. Another is a play. It's called Zere. The play is called Zere, Zera. It's about a Christian girl who he's captured as a small child by people going for crusades. So this little girl is captured by Muslims during the crusades, and she was a small child. And over the course of time, she forgets who she was and all, and she is brought up by Muslims. She's brought up in the Islamic faith. And when she becomes big, when she becomes a young, beautiful woman, the Sultan of that region, he falls in love with her, and she also loves her. And then what happens is, she understands that um, she was actually captured by the Muslims, and then her own brother was also captured like that. And then the brother was actually ransomed, and the brother escapes from there. So it's later that she understands or comes to know about her identity and that of her brother's identity. So the brother wants the sister to leave the Muslim world and go back and lead a Christian life and to go away from there. But then she really loves this Muslim Sultan, and she wants to marry him. That love is very mutual, innocent, and you could call a divine love that was there between them. And then the brother wants her to leave all this. Brother wants her to get baptized and become a Catholic again. So what happens is, the brother somehow convinces her, and then he sends her a note saying that, you meet me at this place, and they are planning to escape from there. So she, being the sister, she has no choice but to listen to her. But then what happens is, uh, that note in the note, the time for the baptism, all that is written, and the place also. But then the Sultan gets that note, and he misunderstands the whole thing. So he thinks that this girl is having an affair with somebody else, and then they are planning a meeting, something of that kind. There is misunderstanding. So he becomes so angry. He feels that he's cheated by this girl. He kills her. But then later he comes to know the truth, that actually this was a note from her own brother asking her to go to a church to get baptized, because all her life she had been brought up as a Muslim girl. So when the Sultan comes to know this, he feels really bad. He becomes really penitential, repentant, and then he kills himself. So he kills himself, and you can see it's kind of a melodrama. So he feels very bad and he kills himself. And then in the end, the play raises certain questions, whether faith is everything, or whether faith is just a matter of accident. It's just an accident that you are born into a Muslim family or a Hindu family or a Christian family. So can you really say that a particular religion is superior to another religion? Those kind of questions are raised. So he's talking about the accident of faith. And then he also tries to show this rigorous dogma of religion. It is actually irrelevant. Whichever religion you belong to, you be a good human being. That's all. So, what is the point in being very, very strict and rigorous about the dogmatism of religion? That you have to be like this, or you have to pray like this, or you have to dress only like this. Those things are kind of questions in this particular play. So, this was a very, very successful play, and it is kind of a pot boiler. The language was really melodious. The plot was wonderfully written. So a very, very successful work. And his magnum opus, that is his greatest work, is called Candide. The pronunciation is Candide. Okay, Candide. This is actually a novella. It's a voluminous work. It is picaresque. Picaresque, as in a picaresque novel, is wherein you follow the protagonist, that is the chief character, right from the birth, and you see the person going through certain events and adventures, experiences in life, and you find the person becoming mature. That is a picaresque kind of a novel. So you go through the adventures and growth of the hero. The hero is Candide. So who is Candide? He's a bastard nephew of a baron. You can call it a satire, a romance fiction. It is making fun of the romance fiction. And what is the structure of a romance fiction? You have a rogue. A rogue is, you could call something like a ruffian, that kind of a hero. not the real hero material. Something like a tapori, that kind of a rogue. And then you have a pretty girl. There will be a philosopher companion or a mentor, and then the rogue will become mature. So he'll become a gentleman of leaving all his previous ways. That's a typical thing. You find the same plot in many movies also. You have a hero becoming more mature. In the initial stages, he'll be very angry or beating up people or getting into fight or making fun of women, and finally, the person would become mature. So this kind of a format is followed in this particular novella, Candide, and he explores the dark world of evil. So when you look at this work, right from the word go, you find so much of you could say negativity and evil, human cruelty incorporated into the story that you wonder what is this man talking about. It's a series of experiences, and then so much of cruelty, so much of tyranny is there, and it's a huge and humongous story wherein this character is going through all these experiences. And when you look at the background to the novel, it has a historical base. He talks about the Lisbon earthquake. This was something that had happened in reality. There was this great, huge earthquake in Lisbon. Lisbon is in Portugal. This happened in 1755, and around 30,000 people had died. So this novella, the story is set in the background of this earthquake, and also he talks about the 7 Years' War that was fought between Great Britain and France. So this is the background to which this story is woven. So Candide is this very wonderful young man who believes in the positivity of life. He's very, very optimistic. So whatever happens, he says it's for the good. So you have a man whose heart is very, very pure, who believes in the goodness of humanity, and then you find the writer contradicting or keeping this kind of a person against the backdrop of every evil that is possible that can happen to human beings. So, if you look at your textbook, this whole list of things that are happening in the novel, and you wonder what on earth is this? Where is realism? Where is reality? I'll just read few lines for you. See, it is debauchery that sets the novel in motion. One of the characters contracts syphilis. Syphilis is actually an STD, that is sexually transmitted disease. One of the buttocks of a woman is cut off to feed starving men. The castle of the heroine is razed to the ground, followed by a massive massacre. The heroine undergoes repeated rapes and gets enslaved. An admiral is callously shot. A philosopher who saves a sailor drowns with no attempt being made by anyone to save him. So you can just see the heroine is outrageously raped and her body is shared by scoundrels. There's a series of murders, attempts at hanging, flogging, and all conceivable forms of cruelty. So you can find as if Voltaire is using his rapier, his sword, dissecting human mind and human cruelty in this particular work. So this can be seen as a parody of this adventurous romance fiction that used to be written during those days. So you have these features like a rogue, a beautiful, fascinating girl, a philosopher companion, and the final maturing of the hero. So when you look at Candide, he's not a rogue, but then he is an embodiment of all virtues. And there is this beautiful girl called Cunegonde. Cunegonde is the name of the girl. She is the daughter of a baron. And then Candide is actually a friend. They're childhood friends. So one day, what happens is uh, there is this a philosopher called Pangloss. So Pangloss is a friend of Candide. So Pangloss, he happens to kiss a chambermaid, and Cunegonde sees this. So Cunegonde and Candide also kiss, and this is found out by the father of the girl, Cunegonde's father, and he becomes very angry, and Candide is thrown out of the castle. So he goes from there. He escapes from there. He is captured by some recruiters, and he has to do military service. He escapes from there and then he goes to Holland. He goes to Holland and there he again meets Pangloss, and he understands that now Pangloss has got syphilis because of his, you could say, indecent ways, having relationships with many women. So it's actually very funny in a way, but then it's very absurd also. It's a whole series of all kinds of nonsensical, extreme things happening, and you wonder whether this is possible in real life. And then they go to this particular place, they go to Lisbon. So there is a storm, and what happens, this philosopher, he tries to save a drowning sailor. A sailor is drowning, so he tries to save him. Pangloss tries to save him, and in the process what happens, Pangloss dies and the sailor is saved. And sailor, he stands there and he watches Pangloss being drowned. So it's really ridiculous. And then later what happens, uh, this one, Candide, he gets into a fight with somebody and he escapes from there. Then there is an earthquake because of which he is able to escape from there. And then he gets a message from a lady that Cunegonde is waiting for him somewhere. And we understand that she also escaped from home and she has been raped and she has been sold to a Jewish merchant. And then these people, they escape from there, they go to Argentina, Buenos Aires. And then there what happens, the governor falls in love with Cunegonde. And then by then a Portuguese commander, he comes looking for Candide, because Candide in one of the fights had killed some Portuguese officer. So now Candide, he goes to another place, Paraguay. And then he understands that the person that he has been talking to is actually Cunegonde's brother. And then he tells that I want to marry your sister. Then the brother is very angry. So now there's a fight between Candide and Cunegonde's brother, and Candide ends up killing the brother. And then Candide and his servant, they go to this place called El Dorado, which is like a utopia. And this utopia, this place is very interesting. Why? Because the streets are paved with precious stones, the roads are made out of precious stones, and then there are no priests in that country. So that shows a place without, you could say, the negative influence of priest. And they continue the journey from El Dorado. They leave from there, and then he keeps on missing Cunegonde. Cunegonde is not with them, and even now. And what happens is, on their journey, they meet another philosopher called Martin. So again, the philosopher keeps on giving him lectures and what it is to be living this world, the world full of pain, struggle, all kinds of problems. But then the point is, Candide, in spite of all these adventures, all these journeys, all these pains, he continues to be very optimistic and positive, and he believes in the goodness of humanity. He does not change, he is not corrupted. So he continues like that. And when he comes to England, he's terrified at the sight of a soldier, an admiral, being shot. Why is he shot? He's shot because he had not killed enough people in the battle. So that is his punishment. He will be shot because he did not shoot other people. So he's kind of shocked by that. And then when he reaches there, he understands that Cunegonde is in Constantinople. We don't know how she reached that. If you remember, she was actually sold off by one person to another person, like that, right? So she understands that she's in Constantinople. And what is she doing? She has become a slave and she is washing the dishes for the prince there. So, and he goes there. So he goes there, and Candide, he pays the money and frees her. A slave can be freed by paying money to the master. So she is freed from there. And by now, because of all these harsh experiences, what has happened to Cunegonde, the very beautiful, now she has become very ugly. She has become all shriveled and dried up because of all the life experiences. But still, he marries her. Who? Candide. Candide marries her. And another, there's a reference to her brother. So the brother has not really died. So the brother is still against the marriage between Cunegonde and Candide. So in order to just to irritate the brother, he marries this hag of a woman. Kundagon, who was once upon a time very beautiful, has now become very haggard. And then you have a Turkish person coming there, and he is talking very philosophically, trying to conclude the story, saying that in order to be happy in life, you have to be devoted to simple work without being concerned with external affairs. That is, don't bother about what is happening outside. Be very regular with your work. Be happy with your small, simple work. So this person, Candide, now he is married. He has children. So the story ends like he and his children, they work on a farm, and the motto is to keep oneself free from three great evils, and the three evils are boredom, that is being bored, vice, and necessity. That is, when you're bored, your idle mind becomes the devil's workshop. So avoid that. Vice is all kinds of bad manners, bad behavior, and necessity is that desire for more and more. So these three things are to be banished from our lives. And finally, Pangloss is evaluating the outcome of their experience. So again, he is supposed to have drowned, but then he is now back, wherein he is, you could say, summarizing the whole story. Let us cultivate our garden. Please remember this phrase. This is very, very important. So this phrase, let us cultivate our garden, is a cryptic phrase which talks about the philosophy of Candide and indirectly the philosophy of Voltaire. So now what is this cultivating our own garden? There are many, many interpretations given to that. One interpretation is that garden that he's talking about could be the encyclopedia. You remember Diderot had begun writing, putting together this huge, humongous encyclopedia. So Voltaire had also contributed to that. So maybe they are talking about that, cultivating this garden of encyclopedia. So when you're working on a big project like this, you have to put all your attention into that. You cannot afford to while away your time or kind of drift your attention elsewhere. That is not to be done. So maybe he's talking about that, or maybe it's that philosophy in life wherein without bothering about other things and things, we have to be very happy with what we have and cultivate our own life and take care of our own domestic sphere rather than being part of the bigger evil that is there outside. So let us cultivate our own garden. So there is this puzzling metaphor of gardening. So different critics and different writers after Voltaire, they have tried to give their own interpretations of this particular line, that is cultivating our own garden. So is it cultivating our own mind, that is reading and becoming a much better, maturer person? That's possible. Or does this mean that you start living by excluding the other things and not getting involved in society and other things? That's also possible. So there are n number of interpretations to this particular philosophy, that is cultivating one's own garden. Is that clear? Quite interesting. And this particular story, I don't know anybody would have patience enough to read it at least in today's time. But then these series of stories, the different adventures that befalls the main character Candide, can appear to be very contrived. I mean, these things don't really happen in one's life like this, one series after the other, and every major thing is woven into every major historical and political events happening during those times have been woven into the narration. So that's not possible in a real life, but then he's doing that with a purpose, and he ends the whole story with this particular statement: let's cultivate our own garden. Now what does that mean? God alone knows. So there are many kinds of interpretation, many ways of looking at the same. So that is Voltaire for us, who is considered to be one of the profane trio. Profane as in unholy, somebody who really dissed and dissected the Catholic Church as well as politics of France. I hope it has sunk into you. That was a little too much, but then